Hi, we're continuing with the audio author reading of the book The University of Non-Debate by me, Michael Leckman, your author. Chapter 2. At 8 a.m. Friday, the Falcone plumbing truck pulled up in front of the airport concourse and came to a stop. A cop kept waving Jimmy Falcone to move on, but Jimmy paid no attention to the policeman. "Well, looks like this is it," Jimmy said to Nick. "Got everything?" "Just one case with clothes and no cell phone, just like the letter said." "Call as soon as you can," Jimmy said. "I know you can take care of yourself. Just don't take any crap from anyone." Nick laughed. "It's what we do for a living, isn't it?" "It's what I do for a living, not you anymore." "Guess I'll find out," Nick said. Father and son shook hands, and then Nick stood on the curb as he watched the truck disappear into the traffic. He walked inside the concourse and headed straight to the airline check-in desks. There was no sign for College Air, so he asked the first free agent. "Excuse me," Nick said to a young woman behind the desk. "Could you tell me where College Air is, please?" The woman had a confused look on her face. "There's no airline by that name, sir." "Great," Nick said. "Looks like I don't have to go after all." Nick turned for the exit and took one step when he bumped directly into a burly man dressed in a black suit. "Follow me, sir," the man said to Nick. "But you don't know who I am, and I sure as hell don't know who you are," Nick said. "I know who you are, and you don't need to know who I am. Now come with me, or I'll have to handcuff you to my wrist." "Lead the way," Nick said. About halfway through the concourse, Nick's escort stopped and slid a pass card through a security lock on a single metal door that was off in a corner by itself. They entered and walked down a twisting, narrow staircase that led directly to the tarmac. There were two beach chairs under a large umbrella just outside the concourse. A woman about Nick's age occupied one chair. She was wearing sunglasses and smoking a cigarette when Nick sat down next to her. She kept looking out to the airfield and didn't seem to notice Nick was there. "Wait here until further notice. We're watching. Don't try anything funny," the man said to Nick. Then the black suit disappeared into the concourse. Nick tried not to, but he couldn't help staring at the woman sitting next to him. She was wearing some kind of designer skirt suit, all prime yellow, complete with a yellow hat on top of her perfectly coiffed mid-length black hair. Nick thought she was trying to look at him through her sunglasses while she pretended to look straight ahead. "We could make a run for it," Nick said to her. She nodded toward the far side of the umbrella, where there was another man in the same black suit standing at parade rest and observing them. "I'd love to try," she said, "but my wrists are too delicate to be handcuffed. I don't like bruises anywhere on my body." She finally looked at Nick when she said it. "Who does?" Nick said. Nick held out his hand. "I'm Nick Falcone." She didn't shake Nick's hand. "Andy McShane," she said, flicking the butt of her cigarette to the ground. "I would shake your hand, but then I'd have to wash mine, and I don't exactly see any sinks around here. I don't have cooties." Andy lowered her sunglasses and looked down her nose at Nick. "Everybody's got cooties of some sort," she said. "I'll bet you don't," Nick said. Andy tried hard not to show it, but a small smile came to the corner of her lips. "Do you know where we're going?" Nick said. "I know where I'm going," Andy replied. "To the college, I get it, but where the hell is it?" At that moment, a small, unmarked private jet taxied up on the tarmac and came to a halt. "Guess we'll both find out soon," she said. The bravado seemed to have gone out of her voice. "Please board the plane," the black-suited man said. "Once you're on board and the door is locked, you'll be under the captain's jurisdiction until your arrival." Andy headed for the plane. while Nick stayed behind and stood in front of the man. "And where exactly is that arrival going to be, geographically speaking?" Nick asked. The man smiled, and it seemed to hurt his face to do so. "Let's just say you won't be disappointed. Time to board now, Mr. Falcone." Nick entered the cabin, and the co-pilot behind him sealed the door. Andy sat in the last row in the back, and Nick headed for her, aiming for the adjoining seat. "Please sit somewhere else," Andy said. "I don't want to engage in any inane conversation with you for however long this flight is going to take." Nick stood in the aisle next to the empty seat. "What's the matter? Don't you like the way I look?" Andy looked him up and down. "On the contrary, I think you're quite handsome. I'd like to run my hands through your hair and unzip your pants and take you in my mouth right now. I just don't want to talk to you anymore. So if you don't mind," she pointed to the empty seats up front. "Well, thanks for the kind thoughts. The feeling is quite mutual. I guess I'll see you when we get somewhere." Nick sat in the middle of the cabin. He'd never been in a private plane before, and he was surprised at the tremendous power the little jet had as it took off. As the aircraft climbed, Nick looked out the window and could see his neighborhood, his house, and those he had burglarized and sabotaged. He laid his head back, and after 20 minutes he was in a deep sleep amongst a field of yellow flowers. They were Venus flytraps, all wearing sunglasses. Nick didn't know how long he'd been in the air when he awoke. He stared out the window at the ground, and from 30,000 feet he could make out the plane was tracking down the east coast, heading south. There was a large metropolitan area just where the coast rounded off to the west, and below that, the beginning of the Florida Keys was discernible. He looked back to Andy, who was reading a paperback book. "Hey, Andy, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I'm sure we're going to Miami." Nick was surprised when Andy got up from her seat and started walking down the aisle toward him, craning her neck to see out the window. "Miami?" "Yes, look down there. You can see the cruise ships lined up in the port. We'll probably bank around and come into the airport from the west against the wind." Andy sat next to Nick. "Look," she said, "I'm sorry I've been so rude. It's just that I don't want to be here or go to this college or whatever it is." "Me neither," Nick said. "But I sort of had to. It's a long story." "So is mine. Probably boring, too." At that moment, the co-pilot came out of the cockpit and walked up to them. "Would you like anything to drink? A sandwich, perhaps?" Nick shrugged. "Why offer us something now? We'll be landing in a few minutes." Just after he said it, the plane banked left and headed out over the Caribbean. "A few hours more," the co-pilot said. "If not Miami, then where?" Nick said. The co-pilot checked again to make sure they were out in the open sea. "The college is on an uncharted island in the eastern Caribbean. That's where we're going." "There are no uncharted islands anywhere in the Caribbean," Nick said. The man laughed. "Now how the hell would you know that? Roast beef or tuna, Coke or Sprite?" "Tuna and a Coke," Nick said. "Roast beef and a Sprite," Andy said.